the DG and a top team from the WHO left Geneva yesterday on an international journey. Could you explain where they have gone and what they are doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, Dr. Tedros and a senior team from WHO, including Mike Ryan, Maria von Kerkhove, Bruce Elward, and the Chief of Staff are in Washington, D.C. To meet with administration, congressional and other leaders.
Fadela, we're not hearing you. Sorry, we seem to be having a small technical problem. Let's see if we can resolve it. Fadela, do you want to start again? Let's see if we can hear you now.
Okay. Question.
Yes, we do.
Yes, yes. So yes, Dr. Tedros and a team of senior staff are in Washington for the week to meet with the U.S. administration, congressional and other leaders and partners to further strengthen the relationship between the U.S. And the WHO and discuss critical global public health issues, including COVID-19 and other issues like the global health impact of humanitarian crisis. So they will stay in the US for the whole week. Thank you.
Very good. We have a question from Jamil Shad.
Thank you, Fadela. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question to you, has Mr. Anders Tegnell from Sweden, has he joined WHO?
No, the short answer is no.
And the long answer?
I will send you some information in an email if you want to explain the issue.
Please, could you do it today?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Fadela, we have a request if you could send this information to everyone. Many others would be interested in the same information. Let's see who else we have on the line. Antonio Broto again.
Yes, also for Fadela, can you please remind us when is the next emergency committee for COVID? And can we expect a change of assessment on the situation, given that many countries are starting to treat COVID as a common flu? Thank you.
The pandemic is not yet over, Antonio. For your question about the next meeting of the Emergency Committee on COVID-19, it will happen on the 11th April. And as you know, they will meet, they will take a few days to make that recommendation. And we will see if we organize a press conference for you a few days after the meeting of the Emergency Committee. It's scheduled to take place on the 11th April.
Very good. And we have a question in the room from Gabriela Sotomayor, and then we'll go back online.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Fadela. I just wanted to ask, there's going to be new elections of DG of PAHO. Do you know the nominees, or if you can send me some information about it? Thank you.
Let me check with our colleagues in PAHO. I don't have the information right now, but I will check with PAHOCOM's colleague.
Very good. And we have Bayram Altug wanting to ask a question as well.
Yeah. Good morning, good morning, Fadela. Actually, as you know, I think I have echo of some problems now. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me, Rehan?
Yeah, we hear you. We seem to have lost you for a second, so maybe you can start again.
I'll start again. Okay. As you know, Fatima, many European countries have lifted measures of COVID-19 pandemic, so they just return to pre-normal of pandemic. So, which does that mean that COVID-19 pandemic could end by the middle of this year? So, what is your projection on this? Thank you.
Unfortunately, you were cut from time to time. I guess the question was several European countries are lifting COVID-19 measures. This was
yeah, Fadela, I think
I will repeat. If you can hear me, I will repeat. Yeah, many European countries lifted the measures of pandemic, and they returned to pretty normal 2020. So my question is: many scientists claim that the pandemic could end by middle of this year. So are you agree on that? So what's your projection as WHO?
Thank you, Byram. Thank you, Byram, for the question. As I said earlier, the pandemic is not yet over. We understand that everyone is sick with this pandemic and they want to get back to a normal life. What I can tell you is WHO still recommend countries to take the measures that are needed to stop the pandemic. We would like it to be over as soon as possible. I would point you to a very important document that we released last week, I believe on Thursday. It explains well the several options that the world have in fact to end this pandemic. Happy to share with you this document.
Very good. Fadela, we still have a couple of additional questions for you. Let's go to Nikkei. Juliette.
Hi. Yes. Can you hear me? Hi,
Yes,
Fadela. I have a question because last Friday, 1st of April, we received a document that the WHO ahead of the treaty, preparation of the treaty related with the pandemic preparedness, they will hold a public hearing. So I thought first that was a 1st of April joke, but I want to have more information. How would, which public are we talking about and how you're going to promote or communicate that there would be those public hearings? Thanks.
Yes, it was an information that we released on Friday, I believe. In fact, we, as you know, member states are discussing possibility of a treaty or another international instrument to strengthen the health infrastructure and our health security. And we would like to get as much views as possible from several stakeholders, civil societies, NGOs, academics, individuals, and the hearing will be public. So we are working on the platform for that, and we will keep you informed how these different stakeholders, different members of the society can in fact make a proposal or comment on this treaty. As you know, it's discussed among member states, but the Director General wanted it to be more broader and to include also civil society, NGOs, non-state actors, academia, and other interested parties who have views on a treaty or another legal instrument. So you will get more information about the platform that we will be using for that. It will be 2 days next week.
Okay, and one last question from Paula Dupraz Dubayev.
No, I'm sorry. Actually, I just had a question about whether Fadela could share with all of us more information about the PAHO candidates. Sorry, Anna. Would that be possible?
We don't hear you, Fadela. Your microphone, I think.
So, as I said, I will contact our PAHO colleagues, and maybe the information is already available on the PAHO website. I haven't checked recently, but I will see what I can find for you and send you maybe the information I have to the global media list of the Palais. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, one last question in the room from Gabriela Sotomayor, and then we'll move on to OHCHR.
Yes, thank you. My question is on Ukraine. Can you give us an update of your operations there? It was possible to enter in Bucha now that it's open. Are you going to send some help there, some aid? Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriela. I believe Tariq is with us and he's still in Lviv. Yes.
Do we have Tariq
yes.
with us? Who
yes.
Good morning, Tariq.
Hi, good morning, Real, and good morning, everyone. Gabriela, we have not been in Bucha ourselves as WHO. We are obviously standing ready to provide any health assistance that may be needed, and as always, we are in the contact with health authorities, and we have our medical supplies that are being sent around the country. So far, we managed to send 180 tons of medical supplies to hardest hit areas in Ukraine, and that was basically to reach 500,000 people. And I can, if you wish, I can send you the exact list of places where these medical supplies went, either in cooperation with other UN agencies or with our colleagues from the health authorities. Also, we continue to monitor the attacks on healthcare. As of yesterday, we were able to verify 85 incidents of attacks on healthcare in Ukraine that took place since February 24th and April 2, and we are in process of verifying further attacks. We are also working in neighboring countries on making sure that people who need, for example, antiretroviral treatment, people living with HIV can get that, and we may have more information on how we try to bring antiretrovirals inside Ukraine during the day. So hopefully we will have more on that. Over.
Thank you very much, Tariq. Indeed, WHO is among the several UN agencies present on the ground, and so far, all UN partners have reached more than 1.4 million people, mainly in eastern Ukraine, with food, shelter, blankets, medicine, water, and other hygiene supplies. So the work continues to provide as much assistance as possible to those people who need it. Peter Kenny, I see he has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. I was actually just wondering if anybody is there from the ICRC, because we know that one of their teams has desperately been trying to reach Mariupol, and the ICRC issued a very brief press statement saying that one of its teams had which I presume is the team that was going to Mariupol, had been held and then released on its way to Mariupol. Is there anybody who can give us any information on this? And if there is nobody here from the ICRC, I'm totally surprised.
Peter, no, we do not have anyone from the ICRC present with us this morning, so you should try to contact Ewan Watson probably directly. he may be able to answer your question. Of course, I think efforts are still underway to try to get to Mariupol and evacuate people who would want to be evacuated from that area. I think this is still, efforts are still underway, but they haven't been fruitful so far, but we continue to monitor this situation extremely closely. Okay, Fadela, I think that's good for you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. And we're going to move along with our agenda. We have Elizabeth Throssell from the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights with us to talk about what's happening in Sri Lanka. So Liz, good morning.
Yes, hi, good morning, Real, and good morning, everyone. Yes, if I may start with Sri Lanka. We are closely following developments in Sri Lanka, where in the past few days, the authorities announced a state of emergency and other restrictions in response to mass protests against the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Public frustration had been rising in recent months, with largely peaceful demonstrations taking place across the country. The situation has worsened over the past 2 weeks amid sudden shortages in fuel, cooking gas, and some essential food items, as well as power cuts. And this led to further protests by Sri Lankans left desperate by the rising cost of living and difficulties in obtaining basic items. After a demonstration outside the president's residence on the 31st of March, the government declared a state of emergency on the 1st of April, announced a 36-hour curfew from 6 p.m. on the 2nd of April, and shut down social media networks for some 15 hours on the 3rd of April. And there have also been reports of excessive and unwarranted police violence against protesters. We are concerned that such measures were aimed at preventing or discouraging people from legitimately expressing their grievances through peaceful protests, and frustrated the exchange of views on matters of public interest. We remind the Sri Lankan authorities that matters related to state of emergency must comply with international human rights law, should be limited to the extent strictly required by the situation and be proportionate to it, and should not be used to stifle dissent or hinder peaceful protest. The UN Human Rights Office will continue to closely watch developments. As the High Commissioner noted in her recent report to the Human Rights Council in February, the drift towards militarization and the weakening of institutional checks and balances in Sri Lanka have affected the state's ability to effectively tackle the economic crisis and ensure the realization of the economic, social, and cultural rights of all people in Sri Lanka. The High Commissioner has also previously voiced her concern that the government responds to criticism and dissent in ways that undermine civic space, and we reiterate these concerns today. We urge the government, political parties, and civil society to engage in immediate, inclusive, and meaningful dialogue to find a solution for the pressing economic and political challenges that Sri Lanka faces, and to avoid further polarization of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Are there any questions for OHCHR on this issue? Yes, we have Lisa Schlein.
Good morning, Rael. Good morning, Liz. On Sri Lanka, it may be premature, but given past situations of brutality in the country when things have not gone the way the government likes things to go, are you concerned that there might be a crackdown on peaceful protests, on the ability of people to criticize and voice their dissent? I'm wondering whether, in fact, you've seen any instances of people being arrested, any sort of violence? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Lisa. Well, absolutely, and this is precisely why we're speaking today. Given, as I said, what has happened in the past, it is worrying. Now, Sri Lanka is, as you know, facing a very serious economic crisis, and there are real difficulties in obtaining sort of diesel and fuel, and some Sri Lankans, not all, but some Sri Lankans are really struggling with the rising cost, really struggling to find basic items. Now, there have been protests, and as I said, these have been largely peaceful. There were reports that one of the protests did turn violent. What we are saying is that it is important that the government does not use the state of emergency to stifle dissent, that it should allow peaceful protest, because that is so important. We're also calling, as I said, for dialogue between the government, political parties and others to chart a peaceful way out of this crisis. It is concerning, as I said, that's why I referred to what the High Commissioner has previously said about Sri Lanka. We have seen brutality in the past, and I understand there were a number of arrests, dozens of arrests, 50 or so people were detained in response to one of the protests. And there was, as I said, reports of excessive and unwarranted police violence against protesters. So we really understand that the country is facing an economic crisis. People are sort of voicing their concerns, and we are encouraging that there be dialogue in order to chart a way out of this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Are there any other questions for OHCHR on this issue or other? Christophe? Okay, I think we can take it. There are no other hands raised for Sri Lanka, so let's take another question. Go ahead.
Hello, Liz. Thanks for taking my question. I just wanted to know if you can give us an update on what's happening in Ukraine after the discovery of the bodies in Bucha, and we noticed the High Commissioner saying she was horrified by the pictures that our team, for example, took there. Are you going to send a team? Is there an inquiry going on? Can you give us some details? And what about the experts that have been just recently nominated by the President of the Human Rights Council? Are they already working? Do they have the money to start an inquiry? This kind of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. As you rightly said, the High Commissioner yesterday, expressed her horror at the images that have been emerging from Bucha. I think indeed we're all horrified by the photos and the footage we have seen. We are looking to try and get access to Bucha, so I don't have direct information on that. But clearly, what we have seen is very disturbing. I think what we could say is that, for example, last week, as you know, the High Commissioner in her update spoke about the possible war crimes, but that was really in the context of indiscriminate shelling of civilian infrastructure and civilians being killed. What we're talking about here appears to be the direct killing and targeting of civilians in Bucha. And what we've seen, and I'm sure we've all seen these photos, and as you say, your AFP colleagues have gathered information, and that is really, the media is playing such an important role in bringing to light what has happened there. I think one of the things that we would stress here is precisely the photos that we've seen of for example, people with their hands bound, pictures of partially naked women where their bodies have been burned. This is extremely disturbing and does really strongly suggest that they were directly targeted as individuals. And here, what we must stress is that under international humanitarian law, the deliberate killing of civilians is a war crime. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, you asked about the COI, sorry. I mean, I don't have too much direct information as to what they're doing. It is obviously incredibly important that the COI has been set up. I don't know what their program of work is, but clearly given the mandate they've been given to gather evidence, to investigate, this is incredibly important, the work that they will be undertaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. And of course, I think the Secretary General and also the resident coordinator in Ukraine have both expressed, as among others, their utter shock at the images that have been coming out of Ukraine and have asked for an independent investigation into these atrocities as well. Just as a reminder on Ukraine, this afternoon, Martin Griffith will be briefing the Security Council at about 4 p.m. Geneva time, I believe. It's 10 a.m. in New York. As you know, he's traveled to Moscow just yesterday, I believe, to meet with the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and other high officials. And he will be updating the Security Council on that situation before then heading to Ukraine to meet with the parties there to see if a humanitarian ceasefire can be achieved, as he's been given the mandate by the Secretary General. We have a question as well from Gabriela, and then Jamie Keaton online will.
Yes, thank you. Liz, do you think that what was found in Bucha, the number of bodies lying in the street, bodies of men with their hands tied behind their backs, I mean, so you are saying that these are war crimes, but, and another question, do you think that all that horror that we saw could be part of a farce? Like some authorities are saying. So, and then what does it take to declare a war crime, or I would like to, if we can have a briefing with an expert on international law, if there is a way to speed up accountability for what is happening in Ukraine, if there is a way. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Gabriela. What I said in my first answer, and I will really sort of reiterate this here, is what we have seen in Bucha, and as I say, our colleagues are not there on the ground, but what we have seen with regard to the footage and the photos is really disturbing. You made reference to bodies where they've got their hands tied behind their back. It's extremely disturbing. We think that in a sense, the brutality with which bodies have in a way been desecrated adds to the disturbing element. Now, what I'm saying here is that under international law, the deliberate killing and targeting of civilians is a war crime. But it will not surprise you to hear that given the way that our office works, we are not saying that a specific incident is a war crime. We can't establish that yet. That is why there needs to be detailed forensic examinations, for example. That's why there needs to be detailed monitoring and information gathering of what happened to whom, by whom, on what particular date. Now, we are working to do that kind of work, as are other bodies, and it is important that there will be a number of bodies working on this. As you know, the ICC has already opened investigations into war crimes in Ukraine. So this is advancing on multiple fronts. I made reference to the Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine and why their work is going to be so important to ensuring accountability. I think with regard to speeding up accountability, that is a very broad question, and I think it's understandable that in sometimes justice and accountability does take time. What is important is that this work is undertaken and continues to ensure accountability going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's turn to Jamie Keaton now from AP.
Good morning. Hi, Liz. Following up a little bit on Gabriela's question, actually, what information do you have at this point about Bucha and the other areas around Kiev, the images that we've seen? What information do you have at this point that might suggest that those images might be fake, that they might be part of a disinformation campaign, that they might be a misrepresentation of the facts on the ground? So that's my first question. Just what information do you have at this point about that? The second question just has to do with Mariupol and the effort for the ICRC team to get into Mariupol. They were held overnight by police in the town of Manhush nearby. I'm just wondering what, if any, human rights concerns there might have been on their detention. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think with regard to replying to, you know, whether what we've seen coming out of Bucha and indeed other areas is not real, is fake. I've said this in my previous answers, and I'm going to say it again. It is so important that the crucial role that media and journalists are playing in this, and that's a sort of national and international journalists. There have been multiple teams reporting, analysing, sending video and footage. This is also being examined by experts who examine this kind of information. the information that my colleagues in Ukraine are gathering is precisely that kind of information, the reports of civilian casualties, civilians being killed. And as you know, we follow a strict methodology, and we've said it again and again. That's why our overall total is much higher than the actual figure. Now, how do our colleagues go about establishing what happened? Well, clearly, it's looking to get, where possible, the name of a civilian casualty, the date, if possible, of when the person died, how they died, and that might then help with the attribution of who may have killed them. It is painstaking work, but I think what we have seen emerging from Bucha and other areas clearly points to very disturbing developments, that the brutality, the targeting of the civilians really underscores that this is so concerning. You know, really looking at the video and the footage coming out of there, is all the signs are that the victims were directly targeted and directly killed. And you know, this evidence is very concerning. And one of the things I said was that, of course, we have been talking about war crimes in the context of shelling, of bombardment and artillery attacks. Now, they need to be investigated, but you could argue there was a military context, for example, to a building being hit. It's hard to see what was the military context of an individual lying in the street with a bullet to the head, or having their bodies burned. Thank you.
And Jamie had mentioned also about the ICRC.
Yes, on Mariupol. Yes, I mean, obviously that would be very concerning, the reports that people may have been detained. I mean, what we would always stress is that people should not be detained in those circumstances, that they should be treated humanely, and I'm sure it's very concerning for the ICRC with respect to what may have happened to their colleagues there. Thank you.
Thanks. We have Antonio Brotto from FA.
Yes, United States has said that it's going to request the suspension of Russia in the Human Rights Council after the discovery of the Bucha massacre. Has your office received any formal request in this regard? Think that this could happen and Russia could be suspended for the next session? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Antonio. I'm not aware that the office has received such a request. I would need to really consult with my Human Rights Council colleagues on that, and I wouldn't want to speculate as to whether this would happen or not. Thank you.
My understanding on that question is that it would be a decision taken by the General Assembly, and I think it's for the member states to bring it to the General Assembly. And we don't know exactly when the General Assembly might meet about this issue, but we'll obviously follow the situation closely. But it's obviously a decision that would come out from that body. Gabriela Sotomayor here, and then we'll go to Nick Cumming-Bruce online.
Yes, thank you. Liz, on another subject, there are some claims that 2,500 children were abducted to Russia. Do you have any reports on that? Thanks.
Gabriela, we have seen those reports. We're not in a position to verify such reports at all. I mean, clearly, these reports are concerning, but I do not have any direct information on that. I can double check. I know that this is something that colleagues have been trying to establish, what has been happening to people who may have left places such as Mariupol, and whether they went in the direction of the Russian Federation or the self-proclaimed republics. I don't have any direct information, and I wouldn't really want to advance a response without checking with colleagues. But I've noted that, and I can follow up again. Thank you.
I think we have colleagues from UNICEF with us. If they have any information, just raise your hand and we can give you the floor to answer this. Nick Cumming-Bruce from the New York Times.
Thank you. I have a question for Liz. Liz, how many? You say that your colleagues haven't so far been able to get to Bucha. Could I just check how many people do you have with the monitoring mission at the moment? My recollection is that there were 6 or 7 field offices, and including one in Kiev. And is that still the case? So what is your dispositions in Ukraine as we stand? And given the scale of what they're having to contend with, is there any intention on the part of the High Commissioner to increase OHCHR's presence on the ground? Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Yes, I mean, clearly the places where colleagues are stationed has really been changed. There is some 37 human rights officers, more or less, maybe a total staff of about 50, but that includes also sort of non-human rights officers. The majority are now currently based in Uzhgorod, which, as you know, is very much in the extreme west of the country, so quite some distance from Bucha. So although colleagues are looking to try and possibly get access there, it is a long distance to cover. There is so much work for them to do, obviously, and I think this is something that has indeed been discussed, that it is going to be very important in a way to shore up our operations there. Thank you.
I think Nick has a follow-up. Nick?
Yeah, thanks. So just to confirm, all 37 human rights officers are at the moment in Uzhgorod, is that right? I can't say with 100% certainty. I know there's sort of 30 plus in Uzhgorod, but I would need to double check with the Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine to see if there's still some people in other parts of the country. I know that there were a week or so ago, but obviously the situation does change. So if you could let me check with them and I can get back to you.
Very good. I don't see any more questions for you, Liz. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again on Friday. Do you have anything else to add?
I do. I actually have an item on El Salvador.
You will be briefing on that. Okay,
I
please
will.
go ahead.
Okay. It seems a shame to overlook El Salvador. Yes, thank you. Yes, this is on El Salvador. And we are deeply concerned by the series of measures recently introduced in El Salvador in response to the rise in gang killings. Since the state of emergency adopted on 27th of March, police and military forces have been deployed to gang stronghold areas and reportedly resorted to unnecessary and excessive use of force. More than 5,747 people have been detained without an arrest warrant, and some have reportedly been subjected to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. In addition to the state of emergency, we are deeply concerned about certain amendments to criminal law and criminal procedures, and these raise serious concerns from the perspective of international human rights laws and standards through the imposition of elevated sentences, including with respect to children, in combination with weakening of due process guarantees. Now, to give you some idea of this, criminal trials can now be held in absentia in the case of alleged gang members, or presided over by so-called faceless judges, and that's judges whose identity remains confidential. The previous 2-year limit to pretrial detention has been eliminated. Teenagers associated with gangs who are found guilty of serious offences may now be sentenced as adults and serve their sentence in adult rather than juvenile detention. Those aged 12 to 16 must now serve 10 years terms of imprisonment instead of 7 years, and those aged 16 to 18 years must serve 20-year terms. Now, we recognize the challenges posed by gang violence in El Salvador and the state's duty to ensure security and justice. However, it is imperative that this is done in compliance with international human rights law. We remind El Salvador that the right to life, the right not to be subjected to torture, principles of fair trial, and the presumption of innocence, as well as the procedural safeguards that protect these rights, apply at all times, even during states of emergency. And this is especially so with regard to children. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions. Antonio Grotto from EFE.
Yes, I just read that the President Bukele is saying that the maras, the gangs, are associated with the journalists, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. Are you worried with these remarks? Can this be considered hate speech? Is this bad for civil society? And also he's threatening to starve the gang members that are in jails. So do you have any comments on Mr. Bukele's remarks? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Antonio. I haven't heard the remarks with regard to trying to link the maras, the gangs. You're saying with this sort of civil society and the Inter-American Human Rights Commission. So I wouldn't really be able to comment on that. I did hear reports that there had been a reported comment by the president relating to not feeding gang members who are inmates of prisons. I mean, I think what we say to that, without being able to comment specifically because I don't have direct information, but is really the need and the duty to ensure that prisoners are treated humanely, and that of course would include making sure that they have proper access to water, food, proper sanitation. So a concerning remark, but I can't comment too much on it because I haven't got information directly on it. I think what it does underscore is, and what I said is that we do appreciate the challenge that gang violence poses in El Salvador, and we do understand that the need to try and tackle it. But that is why we are stressing that it is so important that measures are taken in line with human rights law. Thank you.
Okay, Gabriela Sotomayor here in the room, and then we'll go to Lisa Schlein online.
Thank you. I have two questions. One is on El Salvador, and then another on housekeeping, like you say in English. Are you afraid that we will see a scenario like the one in the Philippines in El Salvador? And then I have another question totally out of this.
Well, can you elaborate on what you mean by scenario in the Philippines?
I mean, what Duterte did with the the people that supposed to be drug cartels and the same pattern that we could see here in El Salvador.
Well, I think what we're concerned about is that measures are being taken to tackle the gang violence that do include, as I say, these amendments to due process, to criminal law and criminal procedure that are raising concerns for us. The imposition of extremely long sentences on juveniles, for example, the way that trials can be held in absentia. Now, again, I wouldn't want to speculate as to what may develop and what the authorities may or may not do. What we're saying is that we recognize the challenges that they face, but what we're also saying is that it is very important that whatever measures are taken to tackle the violence, to tackle the crime that is linked to the gangs, that these measures are in line with international human rights standards. Thank you.
Your other question is not related to El Salvador. Okay, so we'll come back to you, okay, in a minute. Let's continue with Lisa Schlein.
Yep, hi, I'm unmuted, I believe. Your face is frozen, Rael, that's why I'm wondering whether I'm unmuted.
You're unmuted and we go ahead.
Now you're more animated, good, thank you. Liz, yep, I have a few questions here on El Salvador. I'll be brief about this. I was wondering whether let's see, could you describe the conditions under which the children are being imprisoned, whether they're being held in the same pens as adults, and if so, if this constitutes a human rights violation? And has your agency been in touch with the government about this issue? What have you said to them, and what has the response been, if anything? And then lastly, is the crackdown on the gangs likely to trigger another wave of migration toward the United States, which wouldn't be healthy for the Democrats at all. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lisa. I mean, the concern is, of course, that children, that juveniles would be held in facilities alongside adults. What the conditions that they're currently held in, I can't really go into too much detail, but I think as we have said time and time again with regard to prison facilities, penitentiary facilities in many parts of Latin America, they are extremely worrying because of the overcrowding and of the violence within these prisons. So I think that's again one of the reasons why we are so concerned that there is a move to put juveniles alongside adults. In the prisons there is a lot of violence between the gang members. There is overcrowding. They're often desperate conditions. We do try and engage with governments and raise concerns. I think on this, we have sort of raised concerns regarding what has been happening, and I think we would try and continue to engage in the dialogue with the authorities over this issue. Thank you.
Good. Paula Duras.
Yeah, actually, it's following up on Lisa's question, but it might be more for IOM, just to know whether there's been any uptick in migration from El Salvador following those massive, I mean, that weekend when there were so many gang massacres, gang-related massacres. And yeah, especially now that Title 42 is being lifted, whether that flow of migration from El Salvador will be picking up significantly. But as I said, that's probably more for IOM.
Yeah, I see that Paul Dillon has raised his hand, so he probably wants to comment on that. Paul, go ahead.
Hi, thanks very much. Gosh, this is a really bad camera angle. I take your question. I don't have a specific answer for you right now, but I'm talking to colleagues in the region later on this afternoon, and I'll get back to you. I'll raise it with them. Thank you very much.
Paula, do you have a follow-up? I see your hand is still raised. No, okay. Lisa, back, and then we'll finish with Boris.
Yeah, very quickly, Liz, you didn't really answer my question. You said that you tried to engage with the authorities. Have you engaged with the authorities? Have you had any response from them, or is silence a response? If you could be a little more specific, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I mean, we do have a regional office in Central America that does engage with governments in the region. I would need to double check to what degree we have specifically raised these concerns with them. Thank you.
I apologize, Boris. I think you wanted to maybe respond to Paula's question, and I mistook you for a journalist. So if you would like to join us again, if you have anything to add on that, we'll happily give you the floor.
Yes, thanks so much, Rael, and good morning to everyone. Just very briefly, I also don't have an update on the latest figures, but to say that in the context of El Salvador, where we have seen very substantial violence, some of that has been described by Liz today, but this has been predominantly an internal displacement situation. We've seen tens of thousands of people that have been displaced inside the country. In fact, a study that was conducted in 2018 with the government showed that it was upwards of 70,000 people that have been impacted, and this is already a couple of years back. Numbers have increased since then. What I wanted to say also in the context of Title 42 is that we do look forward to the US government lifting Title 42 border restrictions. This has been long overdue, and it will be an essential step to help restore the right to seek asylum, which is a human right. And that is what I wanted to contribute. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that contribution, Boris. Okay, I think we're finished with questions on El Salvador. So last question to Gabriela on another matter.
Yes, thank you very much, Real. Some committees are coming back to the Palais Wilson to session, and for example, Committee Against Torture. And it's important for us to be there in the room, and NGOs and the press are still blocked to attend. So if you can help us on that, we will appreciate that. Thanks.
I think you overestimate my powers, Gabriela. But no, I totally understand, and you'll also understand precisely why the access has been restricted with regard to COVID. Things are evolving and changing, and yes, I mean, I know from many instances previously of being in the room, it is so important that both NGOs are there and that you, the journalists, are there. I think it's probably best to keep in touch with Vivian as to what may or may not be the rules for coming into Palais Wilson, for example. I know that the Committee Against Torture usually briefs in the first floor, and that is in fact an even smaller room. So sometimes that can be difficult, but we do appreciate it. And I know that the committee members themselves, really value the presence of both journalists and clearly civil society being in the room when they undergo their interactive dialogues with states. But I would say stay in touch with Vivian, and she will definitely keep you updated as to what may or may not be possible. Thanks.
Okay, Peter Kenny, you also have a last question?
Yeah, just arising from that, we know that the host country, Switzerland, has lifted all its restrictions on COVID, and many other countries in Europe have done so. What is the UN's stance on its COVID policy at the moment? Because we have to wear masks in some places, but we don't wear them when we have coffee. But has it changed, or is it going to change, or is it going to stay the same? Thank you.
Yeah, I can give you some information on that, Peter. In fact, you will be receiving a note to correspondence today about this very, very issue. We have just received some updated information about the measures that will be applied at the UN Geneva in the coming weeks. So indeed, because of the lifting of a number of restrictions by the Swiss and the Geneva authorities, at the UN Geneva, we will be lifting almost all of the remaining measures effective the 3rd of May. So what that means is that from that date, the premises will return to normal occupancy levels. And in addition, and I mean, already I think conference rooms are already have already increased their capacity, but as of the 3rd of May, all available internal meeting rooms will revert to their full capacity, and in offices and dining areas where desks or chairs had been blocked off to ensure distancing, full capacity will also be reinstated. In terms of mask wearing, staff and delegates will no longer need to wear masks when moving around the premises in bars and restaurants, the cafeteria, when they're at their desks, or in those meeting rooms used exclusively for internal staff meetings. However, masks will remain required only in conference rooms, both by delegates and the staff servicing the meetings, and for guided tours. Of course, anyone who wishes to continue to wear the mask on the premises, if that is your preference, you are obviously welcome to do so. And we will continue because, I mean, as Fadela said, this pandemic is not over yet. We still must remain vigilant. Staff, delegates, journalists who are here on the premises are encouraged to apply all other protective hygiene measures as much as possible. This includes hand washing and, of course, keeping physical distances as much as possible. So those are some of the highlights of the new measures that will be applied, as I said, as of the 3rd of May, and we will send you all of this information in a note sometime during the day, as soon as I can get to it. Okay, thank you. I think that's it for you, Liz. You're free to go. And Paul Dillon, I saw your hand go up. Did you want to add anything? No, maybe that was just a mistake.
Thanks very much, Real. I just wanted to add before we break here that I've just learned that later today, IOM will be releasing the findings of our second round of assessments of internally displaced people in Ukraine. You'll recall about 2 weeks ago, our first investigation revealed almost 6.5 million people have been displaced by the war. And this new round will update those figures and provide a bit more detail about the numbers of children and other vulnerable groups, the impacts on incomes, household incomes, and the most pressing needs of the displaced. And we'll have that out to you probably mid-afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that announcement, Paul. Antonio Broto from EFE.
Thank you. Real, do you have the number of how many cases of COVID there have been in the UN agencies during the pandemic?
I don't have that number at hand, but I'll look for it and I'll let you know. Okay, I just have some a few additional announcements for you, and then we will be able to close this briefing. So just, well, as a reminder, you heard Ed Harris at the very beginning remind you about the briefing, the virtual WIPO briefing tomorrow at 10 a.m. on the launch of the World Intellectual Property Report. It's embargoed until the 7th of April at 1 p.m. In terms of meetings that are happening, yes, committees are still meeting. The Committee on the Protection of the Rights of Migrant Workers and Members of their Family is concluding this morning its review of the report of Paraguay, which started yesterday. Then it's going to meet in private until the end of this 34th session next Friday afternoon, when it will issue its concluding observations on the 3 country reports that have been reviewed during this session. Those are Burkina Faso, Cabo Verde, and Paraguay. And the Committee on Enforced Disappearances, which started on the 20th of March, is going to be meeting in private until the end of this of its session, which ends on the 8th of April. It's also scheduled for next Friday afternoon, when it will issue its concluding observations on Greece and Niger. Finally, no, not finally, 2 other little announcements. This evening, we have a Ciné ONU. We're going to be screening the wonderful film Marcher sur l'eau. En fait, c'est un Ciné ONU qu'on organise dans le cadre de la Journée internationale de la francophonie qui s'est déroulée évidemment le 20 mars. On devait avoir ce Ciné ONU le 24, mais on n'a pas pu le faire. On a dû le repousser, donc ce sera ce soir à 18h30 au Cinérama sur la rue de Carouge. On espère que vous pourrez venir, parce que c'est un magnifique film qui avait clôturé justement le FIFDH au mois de mars. Donc, si vous l'avez raté dans le cadre du FIFDH, on vous invite à vous joindre à nous ce soir. Malheureusement, la réalisatrice Aïssa Maïga ne sera pas avec nous, mais on va quand même avoir une bonne discussion après la projection du film sur la thématique de l'accès à l'eau et justement l'impact des changements climatiques sur cette importante ressource. Et nous aurons Natasha Karmi du Geneva Water Hub, Ulrike Kelm de UN Water et puis Didier Aléli de l'OMS, un spécialiste de l'eau et de l'hygiène. Donc, joignez-vous à nous à 18h30 ce soir pour ce Ciné ONU. Et dans les journées internationales que nous allons souligner cette semaine, il y en a une autre qui est la journée de réflexion sur le génocide de 1994 au Rwanda. C'est le jeudi 7 avril. Et nous aurons une cérémonie au Palais des Nations. En fait, il y a 2 aspects à la cérémonie. Déjà, au mémorial de la Place des Nations, il y aura une couronne qui sera déposée devant la stèle. Ça sera de 10h à 11h le matin. Mais la cérémonie qui se déroulera dans la salle 20 au Palais des Nations commencera à 3h. Et nous aurons parmi les invités Monsieur César Mourangira, qui est le président de l'Association des survivants du génocide, Ibuka, ça c'est la section suisse. Nous aurons aussi un témoignage d'une survivante du génocide, mademoiselle Judance Kayetesi, et évidemment la représentante permanente du Rwanda aux Nations Unies ici à Genève, Marie-Chantal Rwakazina, sera des nôtres aussi. Et donc vous êtes conviés à cette cérémonie qui se tiendra à 3h le jeudi 7 avril. Et à la fin, il y aura une exposition organisée par la mission permanente du Rwanda, juste dans l'espace d'exposition devant la salle 20. Donc, on vous encourage à venir vous recueillir à la mémoire des victimes de ce génocide. Oui, Gabriela.
Yes, thank you, Real. Last question. You mentioned that Mr. Griffiths is going to brief the Security Council. Is he going to speak with the press after, or is it possible to have a press conference with him here in Geneva? Thanks.
Do you want to take that, Jens?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Gabriela. You're certainly not the first to ask that question. There will not be any press availability with Martin Griffiths this time. He's just here for a very short stopover where he'll brief the Security Council, and then he hopes to get to Ukraine as soon as possible.
Good, and we'll be watching that closely. So, well, what I thought was going to be a light briefing turned out to be actually a little over an hour. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, and we'll see you again on Friday. Sorry, do I have another person? Yes, Jamil, sorry, I didn't
No
see.
problem. Is Rosalind there by any chance? ILO.
Rosalind Yard, let's see if she's with us. Do we have Rosalind? No. I don't see that ILO is with us this morning, so maybe you want to try to contact her directly, Jamil?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Okay, I think we can call it quits. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you on Friday.